that it will be good to look at is the neighborhood effect, right? Kind of like the contagious effect. So here, if there are more kids on the block than there are from the left, how is that going to affect my country, right? And here it can be related to the relationships between the countries. It can be related to how individuals see their neighboring countries. And then also it can be related to just these leftist leaders already in power funding, right, leftist parties in other countries. So here it will be very interesting to see whether there is this neighborhood effect. Well, in this research analysis, very briefly, I'll talk about the limitations, right? The first limitation will be the definition of the left. Defining the left and making a distinction between the right and the left is quite difficult, and it's always going to be subjective it's going to be subjective, and it's going to be arbitrary in some sense, right? So that is something that needs to be approached very carefully. I look at Beck's data set, and they have an approach. I want to follow their approach, but then I also want to modify the approach that they are using. But again, that is a limitation, that especially when you want to make a distinction between the center right and the center left. Then the other issue that it needs to be addressed in this type of analysis is the causality issue, right? And that comes up in many analyses. And here, with the causality issue, what I mean is that with the factors that I mentioned to you before, some of these factors are actually caused by the leftist movement rising, right? So therefore, in my analysis, I need to make sure that I am able to determine what comes first, right? And what I need to address for that. Then those are my main research limitations here. And then finally, the possible policy implications of an analysis like this will be to say, well, first, understand these social movements, right? What are the causes behind, what is explaining these individuals leaning towards the left. Then this type of analysis will help us to predict which countries are more likely to have leftist governments. Then in this case, we can also make a prediction about which countries can be those who will have more radical leftist movements. And then finally, I think that it's very important to look at what is the relationship between democracy and the leftist movement in Latin America, especially because Latin America has made a great progress in terms of democratization, and we need to continue to pursue that. And it is important to see how these leftist movements will be related to democratization. So before we go into the discussion and questions, I want to mention that this is a joint project with Robin Greer from the University of Oklahoma. And I also want to thank my research assistant, Josephine Huang. She's a first-year SPP student, for her help. So, yeah, we have 10 minutes of questions or discussions. Looking forward. Yeah, Claudia?
With the shift to the left, have we seen any kind of economic stability or the improvement of economic stability in Latin American countries?
Well, the argument here is that the shift to the left, and here we like to make the distinction between the pragmatic and the radical. With the pragmatic, it seems that they have been able to maintain some economic stability, macroeconomic stability, because they have been very careful. But there is also the people are worried about them too, because they are worried about how long can they keep these bounds. Then with the radical left, we see a lot of stability has gone away. So in some sense, we're really worried about the region, right? Because it made some progress during the 1990s. It was a painful progress, but then you're seeing that reverse. So, but yeah, that's something that it is important from this research, right? It will be important to study, well, what is the impact of the left being in power on economic stability. Yeah, definitely.
I hate to ask you to prognosticate, but is this going to be a problem that in the long term is going to be self-correcting, in the sense that right now the leaders, at least the fundamental leaders of Latin America, came out of the Castro tradition and now through the lens of Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez's comparative advantage is his extreme natural resource wealth right now with oil, that has allowed him the money to produce this. We've seen in America that we've run up to the limitation of the social programs, even with Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. We've run up to our own limits. If Chavez continues to pursue, and the people that follow, his aggressive social platform, is that going to reach a point where that social spending will drive out private industry, private businesses, and the wealthy? And once that resource, its comparative advantage disappears in 40 or 50 years, or whatever the energy transformation dictates, will that become unsustainable, and will that force a natural regression back to the right in Latin America?
Definitely, yeah, definitely. There is also, it has already said that if the price of oil goes, the price of the barrel of oil goes below $40, Chavez won't be able to sustain the type of spending that he's doing, which right now is like around that range, isn't it? 35, right? So it's argued that he's in deep trouble right now, right? And then if we look back to history in Latin America, the leaders that we have today, this type of governments, we already had them before, and it didn't work. So I think that you say, yeah, it will be more like them trying it again, figuring out that it's not going to work, and having to move away from it because they don't have the funds to support it. So definitely, I think that's one of the things that you say that that is really self-correcting at the end. So, but yeah, very good point that you raised.
Time for one more question.
Well, Dean Wilburn had a question.
I don't want to.
Two more questions.
My question, Luisa, was about, you made the statement that the church is fairly the same in all of the areas. And I had the feeling that you really are not looking at that very, I mean, that's not in the model to really look at distinctions.
No, not really. The only way that I may account for religion a little bit will be here with the personal values, kind of like what are their perceptions, right? That maybe religion will play a role there. But
well, I think that since the established church is typically in the world associated with the right, instability and the monarchy and all of that. And I'm wondering, and yet when I think of Latin America, I immediately think of liberation theology and the leaders who have gotten in trouble with the church because they've sided with the left. And that's why I was wondering, is there any difference among the countries in that? Is that focused in specific areas, or is that fairly general?
that is a very good point about religion. I think when we look at Latin America, the Catholic religion is the broad religion, and it is argued that many of the personal values and traditions come from the Catholic tradition, right? So therefore, their views about the left and right are definitely influenced by the religion that they inherit since the colonial period, right? But in this case, I will have to look more into it. But I will think more with the Catholic Church. We have the liberation theology, that's true. But it seems to me something that came out and then it went away. So it seems to me that it's really the Catholic tradition, the right belief that is stronger in the region than the liberal theology. But it may rise up again, right? That will be more like that in the future may rise up. But that's religion. That's definitely something that may need to be accounted for better and look into it. What is the impact of that? But there is a trend actually of the evangelical church gaining a lot of followers in Latin America. So there is some for different churches they are gaining more Catholic. It's not a broad board all anymore. So
Pentecostal too, right?
do it?
Pentecostal.
Yeah, Pentecostal. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So a lot of religions. So there is more religion diversity nowadays.
Well, unfortunately, our time has expired with that answer. I want to thank Dr. Blanco for